And welcome to the Oak Park School District 97 Candidate Forum for 3 open seats on the D97 board. My name is Peggy Kell, and I'm the Voter Service Chair for the League of Women Voters of Oak Park and River Forest. The League just celebrated their 101st birthday, and our local league was established 97 years ago also. Our mission is to educate community members on local, state, and national issues so they can become more informed voters. Early voting starts on March the 10th, and Election Day is April 6th. Our next Oak Park Forum will be Saturday, March 13th for the Library Board and Township Trustees. You can still register for that forum on the library's website. Many thanks to Rashmi Swain and Bridget Opthalt from the Oak Park Library for their technical expertise and partnership in these forums. All right, first of all, the ground rules. Candidates will be given 1-minute opening and closing statements. After opening statements, the same questions will be asked of each candidate with 1 minute to answer. Order of speaking will alternate, and statements and questions will be timed. I, as moderator, will read the questions that were prepared in advance, and I will make sure they're appropriate questions, and so we can avoid also duplications. Please submit your questions via the Q&A option on the Zoom. Candidates, are you ready? Do you have any last-minute questions? All right, so we are going to start off with Erin. You are going to give your first opening statement.
Hi, thank you, Peggy. Thanks for everybody for joining. My name's Erin Connor, and I'm a mom to 3 elementary age students. I have a kindergartner, a 2nd grader, and a 4th grader at Mann Elementary, and I've lived in Oak Park for just about 7 years. I decided to collect signatures to run for school board last fall because I was concerned that students wouldn't have an opportunity to return to school. I also felt throughout the return to in-person process that it became clear that there needs to be an improved dynamic between D97, parents, and teachers. So I tried to convince 4 people that I know that have really impressive resumes to run for school board. I've been watching it really closely, but I've been a stay-at-home mom for the last 7 years. So I tried to talk them into running, and I was unsuccessful. And at that point, I really felt so passionate that I felt that I really had to run myself. So I really feel like I bring skills that would be valuable as a board member in terms of listening, asking questions, and really challenging perspectives and norms. So I hope you'll explore my candidacy, and I look forward to answering your questions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Nancy?
Hi, so my name is Nancy Ross Driven. My husband Dave and I have lived here in Oak Park with our 2 children, currently by 4th graders, for over 8 years. We've gained so much from the Oak Park community that I believe it's important to give back. I began volunteering at BI in the classroom and with the PTO, and 2 years ago, I joined the district-wide iLearn Technology Committee. When 3 positions opened up on the board this election round, it provided a good opportunity to further contribute. I have 3 decades of experience in education technology, research and development. My career has included classroom research with the Center for Children and Technology, management roles at the Shedd Aquarium, Chicago History Museum, and the Adler Planetarium, where I was director of media. I've conducted observations and completed data collection in schools across the country, and engaged in long-term studies related to school improvement and equity. Working in technology, I have experience developing flexible resources to meet future needs. And over the course of my work in nonprofits, I've worked with many tight budgets, working to use the most I can. So I look forward to bringing these skills to the board.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Thank you. Again, my name's Jeremy Duffy. I have lived in Oak Park for the last 6 years. My wife is a professor at Dominican University, and we have 3 children, ages 7, my daughter, who's a 2nd grader at Hatch. I have a 4-year-old, and I also have a 1-year-old. Professionally, I began my career as an elementary and middle school teacher. Actually, I started at the middle school level in Los Angeles, and then became an elementary school teacher, and then also taught on Chicago's west and south sides. Currently, I'm an attorney. After leaving education, I went to law school to become an attorney. I currently serve as an attorney for the Board of Education of Waukegan Public Schools. And for the last 10 years, I've spent my career advising school boards and school district administrators on education-related issues. I think that perspective, my experience as a former educator and as a parent, would be a very valuable asset to the Board of Education to help ensure that we are focused on academic achievement and equity for all of our students.
Venus?
Hey everybody, my name is Venus Hurd Johnson, and I've lived in Oak Park for the last 15 years with my husband Oscar and our two sons, a 7th grader at Julian and a 9th grader at OPRF. Over the last 20 years, I've had tremendous experience in healthcare sales. My selling skills are transferable for serving on the board in terms of my collaboration, my communication, as well as my experience problem solving to get results. I've also served for the last 8 years as a parent leader within our district. I served as a MAN PTO co-president. I served on the DivCo Council, and I'm currently serving as the co-president for the PTO Council. As a board member, there are 4 key areas that I want to focus on: a commitment to equity and an enhanced community engagement, creating a healthy school environment, as well as maintaining a strong financial outlook for our district. So it would be my honor to serve on the D97 school board.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. My name is Jennifer Kovar, and to tell you a little bit about my professional background, I've been working as an educator for over 20 years now. I started off at an education reform organization in Washington, D.C., and from there went on to get my master's in teaching and learning at Harvard. And after that, I realized that in order to really understand the guts of education, I needed to be in the classroom. So I've now been a middle school language arts teacher for nearly 20 years, where I put as much focus as I can on getting to know my students, building relationships, and really a focus on equity and inclusion. At the same time, I have 2 boys of my own. My husband and I have a 7th grader at Brooks and a 4th grader at Lincoln. And further, I have been involved in a number of committees within the Village Board's Disability Access Commission, and the School Board's CCE, Committee for Community Engagement. And so I feel my experience will allow me to serve well as a board member.
Thank you. Kate?
Okay, thank you all. Thanks for having us, and excited to get started. I'm Kate Odom. I am relatively new. We moved here to Oak Park in the summer of 2019. I have a 2nd grader and a rising kindergartner. And by trade, I'm a child and family psychologist. I've spent most of my career working in schools, doing counseling, assessment, consultation, and mediation between schools and families, as well as my specialty and expertise is in providing training and workshops to school personnel and school districts around building trauma-informed classrooms, buildings, and behaviors. So I'm really hoping, as we all transition out of 2020 and out of COVID, that I can be of support to the district in guiding around mental health issues that we're going to be facing these following school years. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the first question, Nancy, you're going to start us off on the first question. What is your read on the progress in equity and inclusion efforts? At this point, what do you see as the short and long-term goals, and how should changes be evaluated?
That is a lot for 1 minute, so I'm going to talk fast. The first is we just recently started officially implementing the plan in 2019 to 2020, and it was obviously interrupted. That said, there has been a lot of work before the plan was officially implemented to set up multi-tiered systems of support, to revise how teacher professional development has been going on, and I think that work has been very strong and is going in the right direction. I do think we need to continue once we are post-pandemic, although we need to continue over the pandemic, see where we are and see what that's done to things, and see where that has left the plan. But I also think we need to continue gathering data on where we are and what the changes that have been made thus far have done to actually start moving that needle over where we want it to be, to bridge the gap and get people over so that we really are seeing equity across the board.
Thank you. Jeremy? And again, if you want me to restate the question at any time, just ask.
Thank you. I think I'm okay for now. My understanding of where we are currently is that obviously the district has done the work and I think really laid a strong foundation by preparing an equity policy. It provides a definition of equity for the district, which I think is critical in terms of moving the needle forward. We all have to be working from the same understanding. My understanding as well is that there's been a lot of attention and effort put into teacher training, providing, support for teachers so that they understand what equity, working on removing barriers within the equity realm within the district as well. Some of the things that I think we need to focus on moving forward is looking critically at what type of decision-making tools can we use or should we be using within the district to make an impact with equity. And I also think, as Nancy mentioned, that we need to continue to focus on the data. My understanding is that there is data that's going to be coming out very soon, and we need to take a look at that. We need to review it and then make critical decisions about how we move forward from there.
Thank you. Venus?
I'm echoing what both Nancy and Jeremy said, in that we have a lot of the right tools in place. And the equity policy is pretty dense, but when you're looking at MTSS and the PBIS, we have climate and culture coaches, and we're also doing great professional development and with a focus on implicit bias to help address some of the issues that have helped to promote inequity. With regard to all of these great things, we really don't have any outcomes yet. Number one, because of the pandemic, and number two, we didn't have those pieces in place to really measure the outcome. I know they've hired a consultant to do that. But the problem with that is that it helps reduce the sense of urgency, which then affects change. So what I would like to see is an ability to quickly measure how we're doing in order to make change and to really have a focus on that sense of urgency to make an impact on our opportunity gap and equity.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Do you mind restating the question?
Absolutely. What is your read on progress in equity and inclusion efforts? At this point, what do you see as the short and long-term goals, and how should changes be evaluated?
I think it's a key question, the top priority of the district right now with the equity policy newly in place. One piece of that puzzle is going to be hiring a superintendent. I bet we'll talk about this more later, but a superintendent who owns the equity work and places that as a high priority. Similar to what Jeremy said, I think the teacher professional development is a large part of what the district is doing now and helps to hit a number of the different buckets within the equity policy. When you really look at it, the day-to-day work is in the classroom, the relationships between the teachers and the students and other staff members. And so the more that we can work to change climate and culture across the staff, the better we can make that kind of impact. In terms of the measurement, we need to make sure we've got a balance. The data is always part of this conversation, but also listening to the voices of the students and what their experiences are like, and the families to fully understand that experience as we work towards closing the opportunity gap.
Thank you. Kate? Okay, just as everyone else has said, it's our district District 97 has created their equity policy, and it is a little too early to kind of tell where they're at and what's been happening particularly because of this year throwing everything into kind of a nuanced and unique situation. And so what I think where we need to go is looking at or following the recent research around what actually helps to improve equity in our schools, which is using more of a culturally responsive teaching model. So we have things like MTSS and PBIS and different academic programs, but they're still built out of kind of traditional or white or Eurocentric Anglo-Saxon models. And so what I would suggest is when we're measuring data and gathering data, we're measuring how are the programs being implemented, and are they being implemented to fidelity following these culturally responsive instruction models.
Thank you. Erin?
Hi. So in regards to equity, I feel like it's been really impressive that when you look at the framework that's been put in place in terms of common curriculum and common assessments, working towards making students feel comfortable in their schools and welcome. And there were some results that they were able to review that showed that Tier 3 students had a big increase in the last measurement that was possible before COVID in terms of a year and a half of accelerated growth in reading and in math. And that's without, really deep diving into the classrooms, putting plans in place for the teachers to implement. So it was really impressive to see that these scores could be elevated just by putting all of this framework in place. But one thing that I would like to see is for us to get a little more experimental about what we can do actually in the classroom, more experimental about what we can do in schools to create a stronger sense of community, and really getting that feedback from teachers on what impact they think that they can have to implement something with students that need that support right away. So that's what I'd like to see from D97. That's what I would encourage.
Thank you. Jeremy, you're going to have this question first, the next question first. What measures can be taken to ensure the district is able to provide the highest quality 21st century education to our students and at the same time minimize the burden to taxpayers?
This is an interesting question. I certainly think in terms of the measures that can be taken, I think we really have to focus in on what the board can actually do in terms of its role. So board members can hold the superintendent accountable. They set goals with the superintendent. They oversee the superintendent as well. And so I think making sure that we have a strong set of goals for the superintendent that are measurable goals that we can focus on student achievement so that we're actually seeing the progress that we need over time is very important. And I think along with that, it also goes hand in hand with the idea of minimizing the burden in terms of taxes. So if we are continuing to perform well, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are buying, new things all of the time. It simply means that we are getting educators who are effective, they are moving the needle forward, and we can do that without having to raise the tax burden on our local community.
Thank you. Venus?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. What measures can be taken to ensure the district is able to provide the highest quality 21st century education to our students and at the same time minimize the burden on taxpayers?
So for this question, we have tremendous resources in our district. The fact that we have one-to-one technology, and we had it pretty early because we've had one-to-one technology for a couple of years now, is a huge resource. And here comes a pandemic, and we were able to transition because we had that one-to-one technology faster than some other school districts, which I think is important. So it's a matter of taking those resources that we have, measuring them, and one of those resources being our fantastic teachers, but measuring the impact in the classroom quickly so that we can make the changes we need to make sure that all students experience academic success. And in saying that, we don't have to, there is no tax issue if we're using the resources that we currently have. I think the investments have been made by previous boards as well as superintendents to put us in a good position where we really shouldn't have any impact on our tax burden in order to achieve academic success.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Well, as a board member, I would say taking my fiscal responsibility very seriously would be a top priority, and helping the community to understand the budget and the funding constraints. For example, 80%, to the best of my knowledge, about 80% of the budget is teacher salaries. So the district is making a huge investment in teachers who are bringing this 21st century curriculum to our students. And so it becomes a balance. As a board member, our job is to help advocate for these decisions and ask the hard questions, keeping the district on track with its vision and its strategy. So looking at the curriculum choices that are being made, we know that the district has aligned itself with the Common Core standards years back so that we know we're helping our students to move towards college and career readiness, and really continuing to advance the type of teaching and learning that goes on, moving towards problem-based, project-based learning and innovative work with the students in the classroom. So as a board member, we'd be asking those questions to help advocate for those decisions.
Thank you. Kate?
Sorry about that. I lost track of where I was in the order. Okay. I'm going to actually echo a lot of what Venus said. I think one of the strongest suits of D97 is the strengths already within. People that have come before me, before us in D97 have set up in acquiring the equipment, the high quality teaching, the programs, these types of things that are already present. And so in addition to what we already have within the district, I think this community of Oak Park is also very rich in what it has to offer. And so in order to kind of relieve the tax burden, I think we look to what our community already has and what it can give. Our community is also a very giving community. And I think that there are opportunities where people would love to provide their expertise, would love to provide their time, their mentorship, et cetera, in order to ensure that D97, all students are getting access to the high quality education they deserve.
Thank you. Erin?
All right. So I feel really strongly about this, that we need to really engage with our teachers. I've had such an amazing experience with all three of my kids with their teachers throughout D97. And I feel like there's an immense amount of talent in our teachers. So we just need to make sure that we're really setting the tone, that there's an expectation for teamwork and idea sharing and collaboration, and really engaging with teachers to find out what their recommendations are to provide this higher quality educational experience for our students. And one thing that I think we could also leverage teachers for is for making decisions and helping to prioritize spending. I heard from my students' teachers that there was a new $500,000 curriculum when they just had a new curriculum that's maybe a year or two old, that they didn't really understand why it even needed to be replaced. So when you think about providing our students on the front line with this excellent education, I feel like our teachers can be a resource in many different ways.
Thank you. Nancy?
There we go. So I'm going to go back in time and echo Venus again to say I think we do have a lot of pieces in place already to create a great district for the 21st century. We have teachers, they've already been set up in cross-curricular and cross-grade professional development groups where they meet within their school and across the school district to help support each other as they're making sure that they're creating innovative and share innovative plans as they go. They also have technology resources at their fingertips, which I have seen, I've had the opportunity through some mentoring programs to be in different schools across the district, and I have seen them used in gorgeous ways before the pandemic, and now the pandemic, seeing teachers do things like creating audible story sharing areas for children to share what they're working on. It bridges the equity divide as well, the digital divide as well, so that all students have access to that 21st century technology. From a budget standpoint, I do think we need to work with a cross-governmental to make sure we're making the best of what the community has to offer.
Thank you. Venus, you're going to start this next question. What is your opinion on the transparency of District 97 board meetings? Do you feel that issues and programs are discussed fully at the board table?
It's interesting. I had this discussion actually with one of the board members. I do think there needs to be greater transparency. And I don't say that as a criticism. I say that with curious interest as a community member. Oftentimes when something is presented to the board, it isn't always their first time seeing it. And they have asked questions that we aren't aware of before they got to the board table. And so they may be, the questions that they're asking may be something that we would ask, but we don't know that they asked that question because of the fact that we don't hear that. So I made the suggestion that, maybe you just need to ask it again in the public forum so that we all know that you were thinking about that question and providing some healthy tension and some challenge to whatever's being presented, so that we know that we can feel comfortable that sound decision-making is happening at the board and that there's greater transparency.
Thank you. Jennifer?
It's an interesting question because we all know there's a lot of rules that go along with how these meetings are run and the public forum, those conversations have to take place. There's a lot of guidelines. But that being said, I think there's a lot of room for greater, I would say, public engagement and community building. For example, I know the district has been experimenting with these different types of town halls and different forums, gathering community input around the equity policy. So I could see the board broadening those types of events so that community members have more opportunity to share their voice and also interact with board members. And I think that gets to maybe part of what the question is asking, just to better understand what the board members are thinking, but really, and even more importantly, for the board and the school district to better tap into district voices, which is an issue, or voices of community members, which is an issue that I'm really interested in helping us to make sure we're hearing from the voices of all of our community members.
Thank you. Kate?
Yeah, I understand there are the restrictions between, you know, OMA and regulations about what board members can speak and say to each other and what needs to be in public forum. I think it also, there are a lot of meetings between all the stakeholders, right? The board meets with OPTA, the board meets with administration, the board meets with different community groups, and we aren't privy to that. So kind of like what Venus was saying, there's a lot of discussion and a lot of questions being answered or healthy challenges happening that the general parents or the general community aren't seeing. And I do wish that there were more transparency in those meetings. I think the recent board meetings have had more of kind of that challenging and asking questions and being more thorough, which I've been really appreciative of. But I think there is still so much more going on behind the scenes that I wish we could see would be kind of revealed and more transparent.
Thank you. Erin?
So I agree with what everybody has said. It's not only that there's so much that's happening behind the scenes, but things have changed with COVID. Not this many people were paying attention before. Some of the decisions, the stakes weren't as high. So that's definitely changed the dynamic. I know as just a parent, when I watch these meetings, when I hear them asking more questions and making statements, I feel like that's when I really feel like we're making progress. Like for instance, the last board meeting, I felt like maybe the first hour of the presentation, I kind of didn't know what this teletown hall was about, and I kind of didn't know the direction that certain things were going. And as board members engaged and asked questions and provided feedback, that's when I really felt like it was an effective meeting where I had things that I took away as a parent and I felt better and I felt more informed. So that's an area where I feel like I'd really add value, is in that listening beforehand to stakeholders, but then really presenting those questions and making those statements just to let people know what's on people's minds and to be an effective advocate.
Thank you. Nancy?
Could you please repeat the question?
What is your opinion on the transparency of District 97 board meetings? Do you feel that issues and/or programs are discussed fully at the board table?
Got it. So one of my jobs before the pandemic was basically to go out and take deep science information, for example, at the Adler, and distill it down into information that the general public could understand and grasp and make use of. And I think that holds true with the board. I think that much as everyone would love to sit through these 5 to 7 hour board meetings, most parents don't really have time to sit through a 5 to 7 hour board meeting. That's why you're electing someone to do it. But you're electing someone who's going to listen to you and share with you what is going on and distill it so that you know the important parts and you can comment on the important parts and you can understand what's coming up that means something to you and have a chance to have some input on it. So I really feel like at this point, the missing piece on the board, I mean, as others have said, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, is to distill it down and make it available for people to see.
Thank you. Jeremy?
So as an education lawyer, I've been to hundreds, if not thousands, of board meetings over the course of my career. And so I certainly understand that this is something that many boards of education really struggle with, because there are a lot of restrictions that go into what can be discussed in private versus what can be discussed in public. With that said, I think the board owes it to the community to do everything that they can to be as transparent as possible to the extent allowed by law. But I also recognize that it's a balancing act, because at the same time, as Nancy mentioned, no one wants to sit through a 5 to 7 hour board meeting, or whatever length of time it takes. And so I think you've got to balance the interests of the community wanting information with the efficiency of running a board meeting and making decisions efficiently as well. But I truly think that this is an opportunity for the board to really begin to engage in other ways with the community. So looking at how do we meet families where they are so that we can still gather the information, we can be transparent about what needs to happen, and the community can really feel involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer, you're going to start this next question. After the last year and a half, what changes do you see will be permanent to the classrooms of the future? How will you adjust the budget to fulfill these changes?
That's a great question. There's so much that we can and currently are gleaning from this experience during the pandemic. And I think we'd be getting ahead of ourselves if we fully took stock of those lessons learned just yet, as we're still kind of rolling with the punches. One thing to note is how impressively adaptable and resilient all of our community members are, from the students and families to the teachers, using the technology to be able to reach all of our students, and how fortunate we are to have the resources that we are able to stay connected with all of our students. I don't think that our classrooms will look the same in the future, because we can connect with students in multimedia ways now. We can do collaborative projects with the student here and at home. So I think there's a lot of work that the board can help drive to reflect on this experience and the shifts we've made in the pandemic with our teaching and learning. And that will help as we're setting vision and strategy for the district going forward.
Thank you. Kate?
I do think it's a good time to start kind of taking stock of what has been really helpful, what has been really effective. And I think turning to our teachers and asking that is probably the first place to start, followed by our students and then our parents, right, and the rest of the community. So I can see definitely, in the same way in any industry, technology has made us more efficient. There are things that we can do easier and more effectively now. So things like the storyboarding and using different ways of technology, but also I could see not just students working together in different physical spaces, but perhaps there's a teacher who's been really effective teaching something. Maybe that teacher can spread themselves in different physical locations so that more students are benefiting from a particular style or what have you. I don't know that there will need to be significant adjustments in the budget to do this, because as we've seen, it's already here. We already have it and people are using it. So it's a matter of identifying which ones do we want to keep using.
Thank you. Erin?
I agree with what Kate and Jen started off saying. I really hope that we don't permanently go away from having snow days. Being able to have those Zoom days on the snow day. Kids need a snow day. So, and it's kind of too soon with all the snow that we've had recently to make a joke like that. But I feel like we really do need to leverage technology. We have such a strong sense of community in Oak Park. Now that all of our students have devices, is there a way for us to reach across schools, to have sister classrooms and to have pen pals, to continue to make this community feel smaller and more welcoming for all of our students from an early age? And I agree with what Kate said about relying on teachers for feedback. How do they feel like they can leverage technology? How do they feel like they can make changes where we have this open mindset of what school can look like? So really looking to them to provide feedback on how we can be more effective moving forward. And I agree with that part about the budget too. I don't necessarily see this as something that means that we can't do this within the restraints of our current budget.
Thank you. Nancy?
So interestingly, way back when film first became a thing, people all came out and said, it's great, it's going to replace the teachers. And they, of course, quickly realized that that was a really stupid idea, that teachers are needed and teachers are part of this. And film is a great tool to be used. And the same thing falls in with everything that we've been doing this year. Technology as a tool existed in the district before the pandemic. It has now been expanded and of force had to go through and really be used creatively, and teachers have had to take a chance to really share with each other, what are you doing with this tool that we have available in the district? And I think that is something that will not go away. Teachers have already started sharing these. Teachers already know what's going on with this. I do think we can use it for, without any budget implications, because as everyone has said, these are things that already exist prior to the pandemic and moving forward. It's a chance to really just move forward with things that we already have and just use them better.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Yes. So I think of the snow days issue a little bit differently. One of the first things that popped into my mind as this question was asked is, we don't need snow days. Now, whether or not the district chooses to utilize those down the road is a different decision entirely. But certainly we can look back to, I believe it was February 16th, where there was a snow day, or what would have ultimately been a snow day because of the weather. And we decided that we weren't going in that direction, and kids could still remain focused and access their education during that day remotely. And so I certainly think that's something that we're going to see moving forward. I think just looking generally at remote options is also going to be something that we can continue to do. There are lots of more opportunities to do that. We have a better understanding of how it would work and what it would look like. And so that's something that we'll need to explore. We already are a one-to-one district in terms of technology, so take advantage of that. And in terms of budgets, I think, we've already invested the biggest source of resources with the one-on-one with technology. It's just looking at continuing to expand that.
Thank you. Venus?
So similar to what Nancy said about technology being a tool, I think it's a terrific tool. And I have seen just such creativity, adaptability, and resiliency from our teachers that has really been able to engage our students during this unprecedented time of the pandemic. When you asked this question, the first thing that I thought of was, when there are students who have to step away from the classroom, maybe due to a long-term illness or some other challenge that keeps them away from the classroom, this is now a tool that will keep that student engaged in their classroom, and they don't have to miss instruction time and just do worksheets, which is often what happens when a student's going to miss time from school. So this is really neat. And I think we can do this differently and continue to look at it differently in terms of technology, but I do not think it will have an impact on the budget.
Thank you. Kate, you're going to have the next question first. Should the International Baccalaureate program be continued in the middle school when neither the elementary nor the high school offers this curriculum?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know all of the ins and outs and the history and kind of decision making that got us to this point. So that being said, I think it would behoove the districts, both districts, D97, D200, and probably D90, since we feed in, or they feed into D200, to align their curriculums and make sure that they are feeding into each other and that it is kind of a smooth transition in between programming. But again, I have to be honest, I'm not quite sure what was the decision to get to the IB program and why it is still remaining, and did other programs just have it in before and then opt to change away from that programming? Those would be the questions that I would ask as a board member. I would be asking the administration and teachers to weigh in on that decision.
Thank you. Erin?
So I agree with Kate. I have elementary students, so I don't have firsthand experience with this in the middle schools yet. But I've heard people talking about this, about how there is an alignment with D200, how it really doesn't put a lot of emphasis on homework. So as a parent trying to get your student to complete their homework, it creates sort of a battle. So I would approach this as a board member with a healthy curiosity. What are the objectives that we're trying to achieve? What are the results that we've seen? What are decisions that other schools that have the IB program, are there other instances where this middle school has it in place that the high school they feed into doesn't? Just to try to get a better understanding to see if this is something that really benefits our students and is meeting our goals, or if this is something that needs to be reconsidered.
Thank you. Nancy?
There we go. So the International Baccalaureate program at the middle school is not the same as what you think of with the high school. It was implemented a number of years ago, and it was selected because it's more of a framework than an actual curriculum. It basically focuses on whole child and includes kind of what I would say is international expectations to it in terms of languages and arts. So I think not having it match up with either elementary school or high school is kind of a misnomer of a question, because it doesn't really, it's not a continuous curriculum that you're looking at in a traditional sense of, you know, you do this year, you do this year, you do this year. It is more of a sense of, here's the framework of the types of classes you need to put together that still ties in very neatly to the high school and pulls away from and pulls from the elementary school quite nicely. So, I mean, obviously I still always look at evaluation, ongoing data, let's see how it's working. But at this point, I think it does meld with the two other sides.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Similar to Nancy, I'm also aware that it is more of a framework than it is the actual IB program that we know in the traditional sense. And so I certainly can see why, you know, if we have a program like this program, which is this broader IB program that provides access for all of our students, we would look to something like that to provide a benefit to our students. Whether or not that continues, I think, you know, as a board member, as a board member, I have some expertise just because of my background in curriculum, but many of us don't. And so we would look to the administration to make a recommendation as to what they believe is the most appropriate program to use for our students, because ultimately we simply want to see that we're moving forward, that our students are benefiting from the education that they're receiving. But I'd certainly be curious to know why that program was selected. Is it working? What does the data say? And if it's not working, and there would be something else out there that's better, I think we need to reevaluate, take that recommendation from the administration and make another decision if that's what makes the most sense moving forward.
Thank you. Venus?
So having one child go through the middle school and one currently in the middle school, I've really liked the IB program in terms of it broadening the perspective of each of the students in their particular subjects. And it's woven throughout each of the classes that the kids take in middle school. I do think that there are challenges with the transitions from 5th grade to 6th grade and from 8th grade to 9th grade. And I do not think that those challenges are the fault of the IB program. I think we need to work on those challenges and make it a smooth transition so that the kids aren't having some of the issues that I know I've discussed with families and parents and educators during those two transitions. We really do need to strengthen our transitions. And some of that work has begun. And as a board member, I would just continue to ask the questions about how and what we're doing to make sure kids are prepared for 6th grade and make sure that they're prepared for 9th grade.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Well, as a middle school teacher and also a parent of a 7th grader, my heart is in middle school, and this pre-adolescent age is such a vital time where kids are forming their identities, they're striking out on their own with independence and self-efficacy, and finding their voice. And so I don't know exactly why the IB program was chosen, and I would want to do that homework to understand the decision making and look to the experts within the school district. But I do know that middle school is often overlooked, and there was a state report card a couple years ago where, if I'm remembering correctly, both of our middle schools were rated on the low end of the rating system, and that caused some alarm. And so as a board member, I would be asking questions about where are we on the road to helping our middle schools make changes to be best meeting the needs of our students. And I know from my own students that keeping them engaged is key, finding ways to connect with them, building projects where their voice is recognized, and making sure that the curriculum fits them. And I think there are elements of the IB program that do allow for that, but it would involve a lot of more questions and analysis.
Thank you. Erin, you're going to start this next question. What are the skills and qualities you would look for in a superintendent candidate?
So the skills, one of the main reasons that I'm running for school board is really the desire as a parent to have more authentic and meaningful communication. So I would really look for a superintendent that is a strong communicator, that can demonstrate that they did a great job of communicating with parents and teachers and keeping them up to date in a transparent way throughout the pandemic. I would also want this candidate to be able to demonstrate that they have really laid the work for their leadership team to be strong communicators and to engage with stakeholders as well. I feel like we need somebody who's like really present and visible in our community. I know that Dr. Kelly pursued an opportunity in Madison, Wisconsin, and now has this opportunity in New Jersey. And so I do feel like there's some members of the community that really feel like they want somebody who is very present and visible and engaged and committed to the community and to demonstrate that.
Thank you. Nancy?
So I think the most critical piece is experience. And when I say that, I do specifically mean experience in a district implementing an equity program or policy, because we are at a critical stage of that equity policy. And I want someone who can come in and see what has been done and take that and build on it, rather than someone who's going to come in and say, I want to scrap everything and make my own mark, or someone who just doesn't have the experience to make it go forward. I want someone who has experience with actual teaching, with being in a classroom and what it means to be an actual educator. I think that helps with communication. Speaking of communication, I want someone who can work effectively with the board and with their leadership team to make sure that communication is happening, that they are felt to be part of the community as they're working. I think it's a critical stage, especially in Oak Park. We are big on community, and if someone is not out there and part of it, it's a problem.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Given this question a lot of thought, and I actually had a chance to speak to a journalist from the Wednesday Journal. You can check out the article, but that was published this week. And I was talking about some of what I think we need. And so as I think about the superintendent search, I think we really need somebody who is results oriented. As Nancy mentioned, I think somebody who is experienced is critically important. That also needs to be someone who is experienced in things like equity and moving the ball forward with equity and equity implementation. I really want somebody who has come from a district where they have actually worked directly on the achievement gap and have demonstrated results. Not only have they done the work, but I want to be able to say that they started with their students at this level and they ended at a very different level, and we are actually impacting that gap. Other than that, I also agree that they need to be an experienced person in terms of teaching and learning so that they can truly be a visionary leader for all of our staff. Thanks.
Thank you. Venus?
So first and foremost, I want a superintendent who has experience and outcomes in implementing equity initiatives. I also want someone who has experience in initiating those, in implementing those initiatives in a diverse community like ours. That's hugely important. I also think we need someone who is an advocate, coach, leader in instruction and learning. We have a lot of great tools, but it would be great to have a fresh set of eyes to look at them and see where we need to strengthen or change a few things. But I don't want the trajectory that we are on with equity. I would like to see that continue and not be reevaluated or reinventing the wheel. But what I also think is really important is at board, we need to usher in that new superintendent for community engagement. So we need to have town halls where we're all there to help support that new board member to build a relationship, not only with us as a board, but also with our community.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Well, hiring the superintendent will be the most prominent responsibility of the school board going forward. So this is huge and something that we'll all be spending a lot of time thinking about. First, I would say soliciting input from the community would be my first step or recommendation, making sure that we hear from all voices in terms of what is essential in a new leader for the school district. But my own personal answers will be redundant with some of my colleagues. At first, it has to be a person who has ties to this community, someone who's invested here, maybe has experience here, and that will help with building trust. Next, I would say it has to be someone who will be really responsive, that has the passion and the compassion for our students and our families, and will be responsive to the needs and really care about the students at the heart of everything. And then, like a few others said, someone who has experience and initiative to keep our equity work moving forward will be a vital component of a new superintendent.
Thank you. Kate?
Well, it's obvious we're all aligned on the superintendent needing to be someone who's experienced, right? This isn't going to be their first job. It's not going to be their training ground, their first superintendent job, their first training ground of what it's like. D97 Oak Park is not a community that needs to have someone kind of breaking off their training wheels. And I mean that as in the same way that everyone else has talked about. Experience in working on equity policy, experience working in a diverse community. And so I'll stop with that and just say, yes, I echo everyone. The thing that I think is unique to D97 and is we need someone who can both balance the opinions and the voices of all the stakeholders, listen to them, and make an efficient decision. Someone who can gather data quickly, speak with people, understand where the community is at and all of the community, and still make decisions in a timely and efficient manner.
Thank you. Nancy, you'll start this next question. What do you believe your role is as a board member, and what priorities would you be pursuing and initiating?
Okay, well, so I'm going to first take a little umbrage with initiating, because one of the roles of the board is not to necessarily initiate programs in one sense. The role of the board is really to set up, here are the policies and the things that are important in our community with regards to District 97, and then work with the superintendent as they implement them in the actual schools and classrooms. I think having worked with a lot of boards, you can get into a lot of not excellence in programming when the board starts fancying itself an education development group. So my job there is to understand the data so that when we ask the district, ask the superintendent to create these programs and outline what the data is that we're expecting to see back from it, how are we going to know excellence? And I can actually work with my skills to say, okay, that's not what we're seeing, or that is what we're seeing. How do we move it forward?
Thank you. Jeremy?
Yes, first off, I completely agree with Nancy and everything that she just said wholeheartedly. A few other things that come to mind as I think about the role of the board. One, and certainly this is on the horizon for all of us, is hiring a superintendent. But beyond that, we have to be focused on, one, being their supporter and their champion, but also holding that individual accountable. I think that's critically important. The role of the board is also based in setting policy for the entire district. This includes not only the board policy manual, which is on the district's website, but also clarifying the purpose, the vision, the mission, and the goals for the district. All of this goes hand in hand in terms of setting the tone so that we can actually set appropriate goals and then actually work to achieve them. In addition, I think the board should be engaging the community. We also have the ability to delegate authority so that decisions can be made that don't always have to come to the board table. And then I think our other big job is to monitor our performance. So moving the needle forward, it's something that we have to be held accountable for as well.
Thank you. Venus?
This is hard because I would completely echo what Nancy said and what Jeremy said. those are very important board roles. We set policy. Not only that, our one employee is the superintendent. So we need to support and champion, but also hold accountable with healthy tension that superintendent to make sure that our kids are getting what they need and that our schools are progressing and moving forward and our outcomes are strong and good. But we also need to be fiscally responsible. We are managing the budget, so we need to make sure that the spending that needs to happen is within the budget that was set. The other thing that I know and no one else has mentioned so far is teacher negotiations. The board is responsible for contract negotiations for the teacher. That's pretty weighty. And so there is where that community engagement piece comes in. We want to maintain and have excellence in our teachers, and that needs to be reflected in their contract.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Well, so echoing what others have said about the role of the board, there's this metaphor that I've heard other current board members talk about, that we as board members are in the balcony, not on the dance floor. And so the first step is trusting and looking to the experts in the school district, from the superintendent that we would help hire, and then the cabinet, the other district leaders, and really trusting their expertise and looking to them for the knowledge of best practices. But that being said, the board has still a really large role to play in terms of fostering and shepherding the vision and the goals. So I personally would see myself as the type of person who, I'm not coming to the school board with a deep-seated agenda, but instead an open mind, the ability to ask the deep types of questions based on my experience in schools, knowing what excellence in education looks like and having that be my focus for D97, to bring excellence to all of our students, and as a board member being able to help guide us and ask the questions to move us in that direction.
Thank you. Kate?
It's harder and harder as you're towards the end of the group as answering the questions, but it's clear, you know, there are actually 6 roles that are defined for board members, and my colleagues here have kind of expressed them in their own words. And what it seems to boil down to is our role as a board member is to kind of ensure that the district and every part of the district has the resources they need to provide excellence in whatever their job is. And that could be the student's job of learning, right? Our job is to hold everyone accountable and make sure that they are reaching the goals that are set out, that they're following the policies that are put into place. And then I think an important part of the role is to improve community engagement, improve inclusivity amongst our community. And these may be people who aren't directly in D97, but they are part of the Oak Park community. So I see those as the roles of the board, and honestly, I'll end. I know I'm a little over time. The board is someone who shouldn't have such a present role. If you're doing your job well, you're supporting the district to function in a healthy way.
Thank you. Erin?
Yep, I obviously agree with a lot of what everybody has said, but the role of the board that I feel most strongly about, and I really feel like aligns with my strengths, is being an advocate for members of the community. I think it's important to set a tone of accessibility and to really build relationships. I know that when I first decided to run, one of the first things that I did was stalk these other 5 people that are on the panel with us to open up the lines of communication, and so we could get to know one another on a human level and share information and support one another. So I really feel like as a board member, I would seek ways to reach out to the community in new ways. I think one way that the board can really understand what's going on at schools better is by having a board member that's a liaison for each school. So they're open channels of communication, can really understand the culture of a school. And if there's something that needs to be escalated, whether it's a success or whether it's something that someone's struggling with, then that board member is accessible and can act more quickly. So the advocacy part is the part that I'm most excited about.
Thank you. Jeremy, you're going to be first on this next question.
Okay.
In the broadest terms, how should we evaluate student progress?
I think the way that the board evaluates progress is really based on the superintendent's goals. So the superintendents should definitely have goals that are focused on student achievement. And so we can continually monitor student progress through that. I think we can also monitor goals through things like our strategic plan or annual goals that are set as well. And those are typically the ways that the board would be able to monitor progress. I think going beyond that, I think, looking at, engaging with the community and community stakeholders, getting to know what their thoughts are about how their students are performing is another way that you can evaluate, at least more broadly, how student performance is going. I think doing the same thing with staff. So where do staff see that we are doing well? Where do they see deficiencies? And gathering that anecdotal information is also critically important to figure out where we are in terms of student achievement.
Thank you. Venus?
So in broad terms, I do think that when having those specific student achievement goals in the superintendent's evaluation is critical. Also, I would like data from that superintendent on how we're doing with regard to other school districts in our state, and then other school districts nationally. And from there, we may be able to drill down to more apples and apples school districts that look similar to us, that may have a similar size, just to see where we're doing. What does success look like in another school district that's similar to us, and what are they doing to implement? What plans and programs do they have in place that are allowing students to achieve that we can then implement? I'm a big advocate of not reinventing the wheel. Oftentimes, I think the answer exists out there in the world. We just have to find it. And I think by doing those kinds of evaluations, we will be able to move that needle and make sure that all of our kids can have success in our schools.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Well, this question lends to an answer that involves balance, like so many of these topics. Of course, we need data, and we are looking at MAP scores and progress monitoring within the schools to make sure our students are making academic progress. And if they're not making the appropriate gains, we're putting into place interventions to make sure that we're helping them to achieve academically. But at the same time, I'm perhaps even more concerned, especially at this point in time, with my students' well-being as a whole person. And so there's multifaceted aspects of a child that we need to look at this whole child. How is the student progressing socially and emotionally? Are they gaining the skills to be able to help themselves in what we call the SEL world, the emotional IQ? How are we preparing this student to be successful in the broader community outside of the school? And there are ways to measure those things, but a lot of that does not come from quantitative data, but from the qualitative, where we're listening to student voices and asking how things are going for them as students in our schools.
Thank you. Kate?
Well, initially, I thought I was having a different response than the crowd, but then Jen, you set me up very nicely. I heard this question as a psychologist, and when we think about setting kind of our treatment goals and the goals that we want to accomplish, we start with client voice. What do the children want? What do the families want? What is meaningful to them? So when we're thinking about how to evaluate student progress in the broadest sense, I think we're keeping our ear to the community, to the students, to the teachers, to the families. What are they saying? Are they saying that their students are healthy as a whole student? Are they saying that their education has set them up to succeed in whatever that means to them? Has this school district provided them with the resources and tools to thrive as a whole person?
Thank you. Erin?
I liked a lot of what everybody said about balancing testing with feedback, about looking at what's being done elsewhere that we could maybe replicate here. But something that I thought of from my 15 years of corporate experience, oftentimes if you it's about doing the work towards achieving the objective. So sometimes you're going to fall short of your objective. Sometimes maybe your testing scores aren't going to be exactly where you want them to be, but are we doing the work? Are the teachers confident in how the children are learning and growing? So I really feel like there needs to be this climate of cooperation and collaboration between the teachers and administrators and even with parents, so that if it doesn't necessarily seem like we're hitting an objective, we know that we've done the hard work. We know what we have in place. We know what are the next steps we're going to take in order to continue to try to meet our goals.
Thank you. Nancy?
So ditto, but with everybody. But to pick out a few key points there, I'm going to start with, I think Jeremy had a really good point with the fact that the starting point is to work with the superintendent to establish a strategic plan with set data points that are not just numbers, that are qualitative as well, as Jen mentioned, and also that aren't just, you know, how are they doing on tests? How are they doing in academics? How are they doing, as we've all said, as a whole child? Beyond that, I think it's also important to bring up what Venus mentioned, which is we need to look beyond our district. There are other districts doing this work. What are they doing? What are their expectations? What can we find from them? And I expect the superintendent to be looking at that, but I also, as a board, feel like we need to be educated in what's going on as well. Oak Park is part of a consortium of schools that are of similar size and of similar breakdowns, and I think we need to make sure that we're strengthening that connection.
Thank you. I think this will be our last question. Looking at the time, Venus, you're going to start this one. Give examples of how non-parent community members can have a voice in the operation and vision of District 97.
Wow, everyone in the community is a stakeholder, whether they're a parent or not. So however they would like to is the short answer. The long answer is people have tremendous talents in this. We're like the most talented little village ever. People have tremendous talents. And if they are interested in lending those talents to our school district for us to achieve academic excellence, the doors are wide open. It's hard because we are a school district that those folks would sort of need to seek us out. Unfortunately, I would like to try to create a dialogue and some community engagement. Just because we have a meeting about something related to D97, all community members are welcome and all stakeholders should be there. And if you have particular talents that would help and benefit our school district and move us further, please let us know by all means.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Would you repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. Give examples of how non-parent community members can have a voice in the operation and vision for District 97.
Well, first I'll say that all community members are welcome to attend board meetings and follow along, and yet it's a lot to be paying attention and know what's going on. And so I think that's where, as a board member, the work on community engagement would be key, and building more innovative ways to hear from all community members at town halls and forums. And I think the district is getting creative right now with this teleforum that's coming up soon. So trying to find more ways for that dialogue back and forth. This might not directly answer the question, but a little bit like Venus was saying, the community is so rich with members of all areas of expertise that could bring great value to the classroom just by interacting with students as a guest speaker, for example. And I know there's a couple programs like the Oak Park Ed Foundation brings in scientists or architects and artists. And so that's an example of where more intergovernmental and interagency work could happen to help us really utilize all the resources to make the most of our community members. So thanks for that question.
Thank you. Kate?
Sure. I kind of echo what each person is saying, particularly this idea of using or utilizing, accessing, and providing easy ways in to have impact on our students. You know, the librarians have brought in, oh, that's my family, authors and you know, particularly community members who to come in and read and things like that. One thing I've done at Adler Community Health Services, where I'm a supervising psychologist, is I built a partnership with After School Matters, which is a program that employs, actually some are volunteers, different community members of different expertise, right? Dance, art, music, writing, gardening, cooking, whatever it is. And they serve the 10,000 students of CPS, or the 10,000 students of CPS, Chicago Public Schools, participate in these programs. And these are community members, they're not parents. So I could see that as a specific example of how community members could be involved and impact our students in the education system.
Thank you. Erin?
So now that I haven't thought about this before, but now that you asked the question, I feel like D97 can be more intentional on how they reach out to people whose students have not yet come into their schools, or for people whose kids have already graduated from Oak Park schools. You know, they say schools sustain a community, and taxpayers want their schools to perform well because they want their community to be a desirable place for people to seek out. I think that I think about like the neighbors on my street who their kids have already graduated. Equity is something that's important to them, and I think that equity could really open their eyes to equity's impact on things like our great school ratings. So even if it's something that they philosophically believe in, it's something that they can also get behind, because when our schools have lower ratings, then maybe we're not as desirable of a place for people to seek out to live. I also feel like we could be really intentional about reaching out to students who have not yet come into our schools. I know when my kids were in preschool, D97 seemed so far away, and I didn't know how to be in touch with them. And then all of a sudden it's kindergarten registration time. So if there's a way for them to get ahead of it and be in front of these families with young students a little earlier, I feel like we could have a lot more support within the community.
Thank you. Nancy?
So I've had the pleasure and honor of, as a data researcher, being in a lot of districts around the country and seeing how important it is to have the community and the families involved. It's not, you can't achieve excellence with students without involving the whole child, and that involves the whole family and the whole community. Oak Park already has a really shining example of this sort of reaching out with the Collaboration for Early Childhood that really goes across governmental agencies to make sure that kids are supported before they even hit D97. And that is absolutely critical, because if you wait till kindergarten, it's not too late, obviously, but you're already starting at a disadvantage. I would love to see that sort of communication and intergovernmental work going on at the elementary school level and at the junior high level as well. I think it's super critical to make sure that we're just inviting people in, and as I believe Venus and Jeremy said as well, just making sure you're inviting in the community to be part of the district.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Do you mind repeating the question? It's been a while since I've heard it.
Give examples of how non-parent community members can have a voice in the operation and vision of District 97.
So I think it's important to keep in mind, as some of my colleagues have said, that anyone can and should be a valued voice within District 97. With that said, I immediately think about the fact that you don't have to be a parent to care about education. And ultimately, education and having good schools is something that provides a benefit to everyone that lives in this community, because we raise better citizens, we all become better people as a result of it. When I think about the specifics of this question, I immediately think of, getting involved by attending board meetings. That's something that's open to the public. Anyone can and should do that. The district also has numerous committees. It doesn't matter whether you're a parent or not, you can still get involved and lend your voice and your area of expertise to those committees, and that will be valued. We're looking at this town hall idea coming forward. And I think one thing that I think we sometimes forget is that the board members are accessible to the community. Their email addresses are on the district website. Email them and ask them a question. I want to be transparent in the way that if you email me, you'll get a response and we can have a discussion about the issue that you have raised. So I think those are some of the things that, some of the ways that non-parent individuals can get involved. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to do our closing statements now. Again, with closing statements, if you'd like to expand upon another answer, or whether you just want to make some closing statements before the election comes up, that's fine. And we're going to start off with Jennifer. You're going to be first with our closing statement.
Thank you. Well, let me just say that it would be my absolute honor to earn the role of school board member for D97, and I would work hard to leverage my knowledge of education, my in the classroom experience as a national board certified teacher, and the various roles that I've played in my school district and my background, along with my general approach to the position, an open-mindedness, a spirit of collaboration, and really a thoughtfulness to help to move our district, help to shepherd and advocate for our district as we move towards our commitment to furthering the district's equity policy, and really at the end of the day, working towards building a positive learning experience for every child in our district.
Thank you. Kate?
Well, thanks for having us. Thanks for the thought-provoking. I actually really enjoy listening to everyone's answers. I will say the reason I decided to run for the board was because when I looked around at D97's board, there wasn't anyone with a mental health perspective. And that was before COVID. Now COVID hit and we have seen spikes in mental health crisis that we have never seen before. It is alarming to me, and I'm surprised that we didn't have any questions today about the mental health of our children and the SEL programs that are in our schools. I think as we begin to transition back into school, we have to really understand we've spent a year looking at school as a dangerous place, a place that students couldn't go without getting sick, or teachers couldn't go without potentially harming their families. This is a different population walking back into these buildings than we've ever seen before. So I really hope that I can bring kind of this mental health understanding and knowledge to the board and to D97. I know that I'm over time. I'm going to put a plug in here. Erin dropped off. It kicked her off. And so she's trying to sign back in. I know she's next after me. So maybe we can just give her a little grace to get back in.
Absolutely. I'll just skip over her and we'll come back when she's back on. So Nancy, you need to go, you can go next.
That's fine. I was about to say the same thing. I've emailed her real quick. So District 97 faces a number of challenges and opportunities over the next 4 years. The board will be choosing a new superintendent. They'll be working with the administration, with teachers, families, and students to answer, how do we get back to school next fall? How do we assess and address learning and provide mental health supports? How do we keep the tax burden reasonable so we don't lose economic diversity? How do we continue the very important work of implementing the equity policy? Because if not all students are thriving, then we have work to do. And I'm sure questions will come up and issues will come up over time. We need a strong board with background to address challenges and take advantage of opportunities. I believe my background in education research, technology, and nonprofit management has prepared me for this task. I think we all need to pull together to be able to create that positive learning environment for District 97 students. And again, focus on that as equitable, inclusive, and focused on the whole child. I'll throw in that my name is Nancy Ross-Dribbin, and I ask for your vote on April 6th.
Thank you. Erin, do you want to go next?
I was having some technical difficulties and I just got back on. Are these our closing statements?
Absolutely fine. We just went around you. So if you're ready, you can go next.
Maybe could I go after the next person? Could I just have 1 minute to collect myself?
That's fine.
Thank
That's
you.
fine. As a matter of fact, why don't we finish Jeremy and Venus and then we'll come back to you. Okay. Is that all right?
Okay, cool. Thank you so much.
No problem. Jeremy, you're next.
Yeah, I wanted to, again, thank everyone for joining us today. You know, you all are the heart of this community. You are the folks that we do this work for. And so I would be honored and privileged to do this work on your behalf. I think my background as, you know, currently as a district parent, as a former educator, and also as a Board of Education attorney brings a valuable perspective to the decision-making and all of the tough decisions that we will have to make moving forward. I also, you know, really want to focus on ensuring that we are focused on academic achievement and equity for all of our students. That's a those are primary components of my campaign. And really quickly, I just wanted to mention that I have outlined a lot of this information on my website. Check it out, jeremyforoakpark.com. But I think that if we focus on student outcomes, if we continue to provide organizational and professional structures, and if we work to leverage our resources, that we can be appropriate fiscal stewards, we can achieve great success within District 97. Thank you, and I would appreciate your vote.
You want me to go next?
Yes, sorry.
Okay. I would say D97 has come a long way in facing a number of challenges: our pandemic, returning some of our students to schools, and trying to implement policies that are aligned with our equity, or implement strategies that are aligned with our equity policy. Even our PTOs have changed the way that they operate thanks to our DivCo council's work. We didn't come this far to only come this far. I'm the right person for the task of carrying us forward because I'll work collaboratively, communicatively, and efficiently with our board and our community to make sure that we always do better to meet the needs of our students, our families, and our staff. And I have to say, I've already begun this work. I'm reminded of a poem that I want to share with you from a young dynamic woman named Amanda Gordon. You may have heard this poem from the 2021 inauguration. The hill we climb. And so we lift our gaze, not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. Oak Park, our future are our D97 students. And if they rise, we rise. I thank you in advance for your vote on April 6th.
It's coming.
One of those months.
All right, Erin.
Okay, so in closing, something that I didn't address a lot in my introductory statements is that I had a 15-year career in the automotive and real estate industries before I chose to stay home with my kids when I had 3 kids in 3.5 years. But throughout my career, I achieved success because of my role as a generalist. So when I started out my career as an analyst, and when I left my career to stay home with my kids at a director level, really my strengths wasn't in specializing in one certain area, but being able to put together teams that work well together, to ask questions, to create solutions, and to really find ways to improve our culture so that we can have talent and teamwork working together to achieve our goals. So I feel so passionate about improving the dynamic in D97. I have time to dedicate to this role, and I really feel like I have the skills. So I hope you'll consider my candidacy and look at my Facebook page, even reach out to me so that I can earn your vote on Tuesday, April 6th. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, candidates. I thank you all for participating and sharing your thoughts during this forum. You all did very well. We thank you for stepping up to serve our community. Oak Park, anybody that steps up to serve on a school board has a big job ahead of them. So thank you for doing that. And hopefully it will be as fulfilling as in 4 years, if you get on the board, as you feel it would be fulfilling now for you. You can view the schedule for all of we do have 2 more forms that are left there for the library board and the township board in Oak Park. And that will be on March 13th. You can still go to the library to register for those, but you can go to our website to submit questions, see what the schedule is, and also to view the recorded forums. We are using the library's YouTube page right now. So if you go to the library's page, they will be having the recorded forums on there. You can certainly share that link with anybody on your campaign forums so that they can watch it. So I thank you all very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.